Sir, started.
Okay. Right. So good evening and a very warm welcome to all our panelists. It gives me great pleasure to host leaders who have had such a deep impact on the industry. So it's my pleasure to host Mr. Anand Nayak, who served he joined as a management trainee in ITC and retired at the highest position as a CHRO in ITC. And now he's serving as an independent director over there. Mr. Saurabh Dikshit, who has been in various fields in the Adani company and is now retired and enjoying life, but keeping in touch with his HR friends and, experimenting with different aspects. And of course, last but not the least, our founder and director, Mr. Anil Sajdev, who has been, at the forefront of leading soil and truly an inspired leader. So a warm welcome to all of you. And of course, to our students who have been here in the webinar, we have Inu Patro, our alumni, who has been very instrumental and helping us with the entire structure of the webinar. So Chinu is now working in soil in the consulting division. Swati Dubey and Aryan Raj are our final year students who are currently studying in the soil Manesar campus. And so what we will just start off with Chinu, if you could just take it forward and let's start with the Q&A.
Yeah, I just want to make one request. We just got the news that our director of the Manasar campus, Dr. Vidya Iyer, has just lost her mother. So I just want to begin by just observing a 1-minute silence in the memory of Vidya's mother as a way to honor her. So. I also want to offer prayers for my classmate, for my MBA class, Jayashri Behere, who lost her husband today. So two people, who had, and I'm sure many of us have had these bereavements, but it's nice to just offer that kind of, just think of those who have been impacted in these times. And so prayers for all of them. Chino, please, over to you.
So, my first question and, start would be with Saurabh, sir. Sir, you've been, you've had a great career in Adani, but, let us, help us understand how those small short-term goals and what are the long-term goals that you have and how to balance them. Because a lot of times as a fresh graduate, even I have myself experienced that you tend to fall into short-term goals and you tend to forget on the long-term goals that you have. But how do you balance keeping intact and managing with the time, managing with all of the resources that you have available, and how do you take that short-term goals intact with the long-term goals and you achieve the vision? So if you could just enlighten us with your experience.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great question. I was always wondering with myself whether there is a very big difference as far as individuals are concerned if they are not planning their life. I never planned my life as far as jobs were concerned. So they were mostly short-term goals. But as far as organizations go, they have to have short-term and long-term goals. Let me try and illustrate through an example. When I joined the Adani Group, it was very, very small. It had only 225 people and only one business, that was trading. But, and it was 1998. But in 3 years' time, they were already building a port and were getting into building Adani Wilmar, which was going to be later on a big company. So the short-term goals, what were they at that time? They were to, continue to become continue as the #1 trading house for a long period of time. make sure that that happens, build a port and make it run, and build a consumer goods organization for the first time in edible oil on a scale which has not happened earlier, and try and be number one. But how do we do that? And so do we call these as the short-term or the long-term goals? We thought they were the short-term goals, which were also a long-term goal if you take a horizon of 3 years. And this was necessary because when you're building an organization, the first thing that you have to do is get people in the organization and get the skill sets that are required. Now, if you look at it as a short goal, very small time period goal, then let's take example of Adani Wilmar Limited. We had a CEO who understood international commodity trading. We had a head of projects who knew how to build organizations. But we were looking for someone to set up our marketing, sales, do the brand building, etc., which would have been required 2 years from the time we wanted the CEO to be in, because no marketing would start unless you had a product. However, I felt otherwise, and so did some of the other senior people. And we said, why don't we build a person from now who would understand that as a business rather than just marketing? So we recruited a top-notch marketer 2 years in advance, let him do a lot of trading internationally, because in edible oil business, trading becomes a major part of the business. Unless you understand international trading, you will not be a successful company. So we did that as an experiment. This gentleman, of course, did a lot of marketing background work, but was almost 80% full-time into trading, learning trading, doing trading later on, and becoming a good trader. And I think we were pretty good in having estimated our needs for long-term goals, because he happens to be the managing director at present of that company. So I think you will have to, management sometimes may say, no, why do we want to spend so much on a person 2 years in advance? But if the thinking is right, then you do that. And you sometimes have to get help of outside consultants to kind of, home your point through, which we had to do in this case. Also, we had some outside consultants to help us do that. I hope I have tried to kind of illustrate what I remember to have done.
Yes, beautifully. Over to you, Shwati. We can move to the next question.
Thank you, Shinu. Thank you for passing the baton to me. Hello, everyone. A very good evening to one and all present here. I would like to begin by mentioning that it's truly an honor and a privilege to be a part of a panel where such esteemed leaders are present. And taking this session forward without any delay, I would direct my first question to Anil sir. So, sir, my question is very direct and straightforward. Who were the actually people who inspired you the most, and why?
First of all, my parents, because they taught me the value that the most important thing in a life is not a thing, and taught us the importance of, the intangibles. Second, when I was very young, we met Swami Chinmayananda, our spiritual teacher. And just to see him wake up every morning at 4 a.m. answering to devotees worldwide, and just the amount of effort he was doing to serving everybody with a smile on his face, even when he had extreme ventricle failure, he was giving a talk. And he told the doctors, you do your job and I have to do my job, So such an inspiring person who worked all his life for serving the well-being of others. And then, of course, so many other people. In business, I think the person who inspired me the most was my mentor and the chairman and founder of Aisha Group, Mr. Vikram Lal. I think nobody knows him because he was never in the media. But he, from behind the scenes, the way he lived his life and the way we observed him, I think clearly he's perhaps the most compassionate, ethical, and the best listener in my life, with a very great quality of mind. So we learned a lot by being in his presence. And then, of course, you learn from your siblings, you learn from your colleagues, you learn from my wife, whom I met when I was in college. And, she has a solid strength, and she has been, we've been college sweethearts, and what she has done in my life is amazing. And all the amazing people, and including all the amazing students I work with today. So I think people inspire you at different stages of your life, but the foundation is laid by the early teachers that I. Thank you for asking.
Sir, I have a question as a corollary to what you just said. And it's on a lighter note. Sir, you were 19 when you met your wife, and by the time you're 23, you decided to marry her. People take, by 33, they can't decide. How did you, what was the one thing that you decided that this is it? And it's a mutual thing.
On my
I have my kids, and they are closer to 30 and they say we are still young and we don't know whom to get married to. So
on my third date with my wife at Pashan Lake in Pune, I proposed to her when I was just around 20. And then I got married when I was 22 and a half. I think it's very important to have a partnership that complements each other. And I think I could see that she completes me. I mean, she had a lot of things in herself which I thought were necessary. And, if I am the one, for example, who does not have an understanding of how I manage my funds, Neera is the one from day one who has managed the finances. And even now she's on the board of Soil, and she helps us to make sure we keep watching cash. We don't just keep talking about different things. And, so it's such an important part to have that. And I think just like in any team, in any organization as well, you have to be aware of what you're good at, and you have to also be very aware of what you are not good at when you're building a team, and make sure you surround yourself with people who have those strengths which you don't necessarily have. And that's such an important gift to give to yourself.
thank you, sir. Yes.
Thank you, sir. That was really inspiring. And I believe what you are today, the values and the persona that you carry are because of the interaction and the inspiration, which actually have led you to make a larger positive impact. And that has actually made you a leader in true ways, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to pass on to my dear friend Aryan for the next question.
Thank you, Swati. I'm very happy to be part of this discussion, and my question will be directed to Mr. Anand, sir. So, as today companies are expected to strengthen their stance on ESG, how can businesses become a force of a good and lead initiatives toward making a difference at ground level? And what are some of the emerging trends that you see?
Yeah, I think it is important for us to look beyond ESG mandates. I think ESG must be intrinsic to the DNA of all organizations. And every enterprise must be committed to 3 bottom lines. I call it the triple bottom line. Each organization must be committed to generating economic capital, social capital, and environmental capital. Enterprises and businesses cannot succeed if societies fail. And societies will fail if we do not create social capital and environmental capital in addition to economic capital. So today and even in the future, given the reality of climate change and the widening economic disparities, corporates have a responsibility to address these issues proactively for their own survival. We would need to creatively tweak our business models so that in addition to generating economic surpluses, they also generate livelihoods. And that's how you create social capital. You will also find that in course of time, even consumers will show preference for the products and services of companies who are known to generate economic value, societal value, as well as environmental value. So even from the point of view of enlightened self-interest, I think it's important for all of us to be committed to a triple bottom line, to generating economic value, to generating social capital, and to generating environmental capital as well. So that's basically what my response to your question.
Thank you, sir.
If I can ask you, when you look at the ESG goals, ITC has been at the forefront right from the time that Mr. Deveshwar was there. But this has been a very recent phenomena. But exactly what they can do in terms of the ESG goals, because this has really come up in a big way after this climate conference and all happened, the COP etc. So exactly what can the companies do instead of, when do you say to build into the DNA? How do they build into their DNA?
Well, I think it's a matter of being committed to a philosophy and committed to a strategy. And if you look at ITC, I think we went into the triple bottom line far earlier than CSG came to be, even ESG came to be spoken about. So I'm talking about the mid to late 90s when we started. So long before the Companies Act was amended or to make CSR mandatory in some way or the other. I think basically we realized that if we are to build a sustainable organization, that sustainable organization would retain its identity only if it focused on creating not just economic value and surplus, but also creating social capital and environmental capital. And let me give you an example. For instance, we are in the paperboard business, and there the raw material for paper is pulp, right? And in the earlier days, pulp used to be imported from Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., etc. So we got down and asked ourselves the question: instead of importing pulp, why don't we create opportunities for people with marginalized farmers and people who own land, but the land was not really productive? Why don't we create opportunities for them to develop plantations of eucalyptus, bamboo, sobabul, etc., and we will buy from them the produce and use this to make pulp in our own paper mill rather than import it from outside. So we achieved two objectives through this one action. We were able to generate livelihoods because these people were engaged in cultivation, and we bought the produce of them. By building these plantations or by cultivating bamboo, sobabul, and casuarina, etc., they added to the green cover of the nation, right? So that's an important environmental intervention, right? And we also at that time saved foreign exchange for the country. I'm talking about the late 90s, where foreign exchange was something that to be concerned about, right? So the point I'm making is that enterprises can tweak their business models, can still make profit, can still generate value, at the same time make a contribution to environmental capital and to social capital. And that's what I thought I'd like to explain to you today. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Arun. So moving forward, I would like to pose my next question to Saurabh Dixit, sir. So, sir, my question would be, uh, downsizing the manpower is always the toughest call for any HR. And even in your career also, sir, you had to take this call in the interest of the organization. And even recently also, we are hearing a lot about the layoffs, retrenchments. So what would be your suggestion to young leaders to deal with such a dilemma?
Okay. As I can see, there are three things that happen when you have to kind of say bye-bye to people. One is there is a major change in the business. Either there is a downside, or you sell a business to somebody, or you are not making money, or you go bankrupt in that part of the business. So that is one. The other is people who are not doing well as far as their performance is concerned. And therefore, you would like to kind of say bye-bye to them. And the third is sometimes, for no fault of the person or the boss, there are pressures. They could be political, they could be vindictive, they could be any other forces which require you to get rid of some people. Now, the way to handle these are, of course, entirely different. Let me take the first one. When it is a business need in a bulk that you are going to kind of stop that business. When you talk to people on a one-to-one basis, as far as possible, that should be done either by yourself or your team, which would have to do that so that you have a personal touch when you do that. Most of the people are aware that this is happening, so you don't really have to explain why that meeting happens. As a responsible organization, let me take an example of the Adani Group in this regard. We used to run a very large supermarket business, and which we sold to Reliance Industries Limited. And they said, we'll take the business, but not the people. So we had 2,000 people to take care of. We placed them wherever we could within the organization, and we could do a lot of them that way because we were a growing organization. But there were still quite many, more than, I would say, 800 people whom we talked to and talked to outside placement agencies and got them all jobs without much of an effort. And many of them keep in touch with me on their birthdays or my birthdays even now. So as an individual, you remain friends with them, explain the situation, which sometimes has no control either way, either on their side or on our side, and do the best possible, but be humane, gentle, and soft about it. And I think that takes care of that. Coming to the second part, where an individual is not performing. First of all, whether it is really true, or are you getting into a trap that your expectations are too much and your resources provision is not enough or whatever. So with the boss of the person who says he's not doing well, you have to sit with that person and have a chat so that you make sure that it is really true that he's not performing. Give him one more chance, say 3 months, 6 months, depending on the kind of level or the person we are talking about, and monitor it together at regular intervals. And if at the end of it, it improves, very good. If it doesn't, then I think by then everybody is agreeing that, okay, that is fine. That may be good for the person to go out and find something different. And again, handhold if you can, while he's trying to get some job outside. The third one is the most difficult. The third one is you believe that man has not done anything wrong. You don't want to get rid of him. Sometimes you wonder whether I should resign because I don't like doing this. But then after that thought happens, you still feel that, okay, I will tell myself I didn't do it, but somebody else will do it because that's a decision the organization is going to make. So how best can I handle it without losing 2 people instead of 1? So when that happens, you talk to the person, be open about it, say, I agree that you have not done anything, but I am in no position to say,
Yeah, I think because of some technical issue, we seem to have lost Saurabh. He'll probably come back. But why don't we?
Yeah, Anand sir has raised his hand. So you have something to say?
Yeah, if I might just add, Swati, I think while the question you raised is very relevant and very important, and you've listened to Mr. Dixit's responses, I also think that you as future business leaders must also take into account that apart from creating employment in your enterprises, it's important to look at how can you create livelihoods outside the boundaries of your organization. Because if you look at backward linkages, if you look at your supply chain, there is so much you can do to actually expand the creation of livelihoods. And don't focus only on employment within the boundaries of your organization. You can really tweak your business models in a manner that makes it profitable for you to examine your supply chain, to examine backward linkages. And there are many ways in which you can really create millions of livelihoods and impact the lives of millions of people if you're prepared to think out of the box. So I would urge you as business leaders of the future to not just focus on what you can do within the boundaries of your enterprise, but what can you do by extending your attention and your thinking and your strategy outside the boundaries of your enterprise. And you can see you can have a huge impact outside as well. I just thought I'd leave that thought with.
Good.
Yes, sir, absolutely right. And I totally agree with you. I believe downsizing is something that is inevitable, that is not in our control. But as an HR, we need to be more humane and gentle and we should be more into the creation of the livelihood, as you said, sir. So you wrap it pretty well, sir. Thank you. Now moving on to the next question, Aryan.
So my question will be directed to Anil, sir. So at the age of 27, you were moved from the Aisha corporate office to the head operation of the Faridabad plant. How did you gain the acceptance from the employees, the union, and the colleagues who were much older than you?
Yeah, and I was replacing Mr. Sehgal, who had risen in the ranks, much older and much more seasoned, and he was heading that plant for a long time. So if there was this experiment, my chairman said, Anil, you are good at helping people and by advising them, and go and manage this team yourself. So here I have this 1,000 people with me at the age of 27, never managed a plant. I think I became a student. I first told people that, this is something that I would like to learn with you. And I did not feel shy of going and telling people I don't understand this. And I would spend a lot of time on the shop floor. And I mingled with the workers and their families, including, in Aisha, we had this culture that every plant had a social worker, a master's in social work person who would be paying attention to the way people were living in the town and that adjacent villages near Faridabad. So if there was a worker's son getting married or a daughter getting married, I would go along when the people would say, go there. Or if there was a death in the family, I would go and visit. So it was like learning and being part of the family. But there were, all of a sudden, there was this internal union that we had, and there was a militant kind of person who got elected, and he began to apply a lot of pressure on us. First, they said, okay, there was a high demand for our tractors. So they said, we will help you to achieve the record numbers. So in 1 month, we achieved those days 1,500 tractors, which was the highest ever. But then they began to demand, they said, whenever you give us this kind of, we give you these record production, you must give us a suitable gift over and above the incentive. And they began to negotiate what should be the value of the gift. And the demand, I thought, became unreasonable because this new union leaders were trying to establish them. And, they went on they started deliberately lowering production and stopping. And one evening, they actually surrounded us in it's like a ghirao. And although there was no strike, but they did not prevent us to go home. And this had never happened in the history of our plant in Aisha. So that day, here I am, 27 and a half, 28 years old. My boss was in Germany. And, there was no one else in charge. And I called all my colleagues, including my HR colleagues, together. And in this late evening meeting, we decided to suspend the entire union. And it was a decision we took because we said we cannot allow this to happen in this plant. And so we suspended the entire union. But the interesting thing is they never thought that this young person would actually, with the help of his team, make such decisions. And of course, fortunately for us, there were enough positive people amongst the workers through back channels. They spoke to us and the situation got changed. But I just want to end the story of my Faridabad plant experience by saying the best part was, when we were then signing a settlement with the union, I told my management colleague, let's do something interesting and creative. Let's give them a charter of demand from our side, just as they give us a charter of demand. And I called the union and all the different factions together. It was an internal union, but there were different factions. We got all of them together to say, we want to know what will you do to improve the workmen. Are you going to put in charter of demands? For example, when people retire, how should they be prepared for retirement? As one example, what kind of investment we should do in the people's capabilities so they get prepared for the future? How do they improve the education of their own children? And things of this kind. The workers were the union was stunned. They said, this is management putting a charter of demand? I said, yes, because you keep negotiating wages, but you never look at the long-term future of. So I think we really thought out of the box. And I think by bringing people together, and my own approach was, I don't know, I have to learn from you. And I think that's what the whole thing was. It was very enthusiastic. And I think fortunately for us, there were many external pressures, but because Aisha was 100% ethical, we will never bribe a single government official. I think that gave us the power to do many things because we had the fiber of the company, which was very strong. And so I think that's what I think those 3.5 years when I was head of the plant was a wonderful experience. And, a few years later, I was taking a client from Aisha Consulting, the MD of Indal, Tapan Mitra, who himself was an ex-union leader. He brought his entire leadership team to visit the Aisha factory before giving the contract to Aisha Consulting. And when I took them to the plant, he suddenly found workers coming and giving me a hug and embracing me. So here was this man from the engine assembly who suddenly came and hugged me. And he said, Anil, what is this? You are an MD of this company, a board member of the Aisha Corporation. And these workers are coming and hugging you. What kind of culture is this? So I said, I may be having a position, but I am an employee just like them. And as the union would always tell us, they said, many people like you will come and go. People like you in management will come and go. But for us, this is our future. This is our company. We have to stay here. So I think that kind of relationship that we built with them, so much so that even today, that relationship continues so strongly, is something because of the environment there. And I think the honest purpose that we were able to bring together. So thank you for asking.
Thank you for the answer, sir.
I
Chinu?
think we would request Mr. Saurav. I think you got dropped off. So would you like to complete your answer, sir?
You are on mute, Saurav.
You're on mute. You're on mute, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes. You're audible.
Yeah. Well, so, the third thing that I was mentioning was the most difficult part of getting rid of people who really don't require to be got rid of. But I found that at the end, some of them have found better places, better fits, and they continue to be friends with me even today. Like Anil was just mentioning, when we meet, there are old employees, irrespective of levels, who greet each other very, very jovially and remember all the good times we have had together, even though they may have been, kind of got rid of from the company through the media that the HR is.
Thank you, Saurav, sir, for giving us the last piece. So my next question would be to Anand, sir. Sir, you have narrated in your story that you have been witness to changing relationship between employee and employer. Like when the new workforce was building up in 1980s, you saw that employee-employer relationship was shifting from being psychological, emotional, to being very much transactional. And now we are seeing that the relationship is shaping towards shared value between the employee and employer, and shared vision and shared passion. So what would be your stance to all the HR professionals, all the business professionals? How do we take this challenge and come up with ideas to manage that shift?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking that. Now I think the old days of managing employee relations by dealing only with union leaderships and recognized unions, those are all far gone, right? As management, we need to respect union leaderships and unions as partners and stakeholders in the enterprise. We have to really shift from an erstwhile adversarial mindset to a mindset of partnership and stakeholdership. And the moment you change your mindset, your behavior towards your employees and your unions changes. And when your behavior changes, it actually you'll actually see that their behavior towards you changes as well. So it's so important to keep revisiting your paradigms and your mindsets. Now, at the same time, we can't allow unions and collectives to come in the way of our individual relationships with employees. There has to be a delicate balance that we have to forge between managing collectives and managing individual employees. We need to look at each employee as an individual who is unique, and we need to look at him from the perspective of the multiple roles that he plays. He's not just an employee, he's a parent, he's a son, he's a neighbor, he's a community worker, He's someone in his neighborhood. And we have to really, how do we help him actualize his potential in each one of these roles, not treat him just as a resource to get work done. I think that's the kind of mindset we need to have. And I think we also need to understand that the aspirations of newer generations of employees are very different from the older generations. The challenge is to understand the nature of this change so that we can focus more on employee engagement, which wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. So the HR role really has changed radically over the last 20 years, but the values of the HR function the values in which the HR function was anchored in remain the same. Your practices may change, but your values have to be the same. Your values of transparency, of integrity, of trusteeship, of respect for people, of ethical conduct. I think that remains the same. It's only how HR practices have to change, keeping in mind that you have a newer workforce with different aspirations, a newer workforce which is influenced by social media, by all kinds of trends, and we have to change accordingly. So you are fortunate that you are at an age where you are part of this new generation. So you would be able to vibe with the newer generation far more impactfully. But for older HR people who are in their 50s and mid 50s and perhaps early 60s, it's important to really recognize this change that has taken place and to make the change in your mindset accordingly. That's what I had to respond to.
Yes, truly, sir. The core remains the same, but how you perceive and make that shift in your day-to-day changing scenario is what we should be aware of. Yeah, I'm passing on.
My question will be directed to Saurabh. So for a big group like Adani, which has a lot of businesses, how important do you feel for the HR professionals to understand the inextricable linkage of HR strategies with the business strategies?
I don't see HR strategies as different from business strategies. They are the same. I mean, how can you have an HR strategy that says that you do X when the business strategy says you do Y? It will not work. It's like putting the wrong kind of people in the wrong kind of jobs. But to be able to align them, first, I don't know whether you have been working more on the marketing side, so you might be hearing this. In most companies that I have worked in, HR people are taken for granted as far as their understanding of people is concerned, because everybody feels that what do they do? Kuch nahi na. We do everything. We do the business. The finance does business, so they understand everything about HR. The converse has rarely been true. Not many HR people in the olden days knew much about finance or manufacturing or law other than the labor laws and the other departments of the business. And therefore, they were not able to make inroads. And the reason I felt was that there were too much of labor union relationships which kept people occupied most of their work time in handling day-to-day problems with the union and the management, etc. I think if HR people understand business, try to understand how it works, what are the skills required to do the business, what are the plans, what are the strategies, how the world market is, then they will be able to contribute on an equal footing to other departments. Take an example. In the earlier times, very rarely did you find an HR person as as a director in the board. As things changed over a period of time, a lot of companies had HR people as directors on the board. And later on, you will find them as chairman of big companies who came through HR stream. But they are the people who kind of got into the business of understanding business. So my advice to all HR budding people is first try and understand the businesses that you are in. Now, take for example the case of multiple businesses that the Adani Group has developed. What was it? It was only a trading house when it started, right? But then it became a port, one of the best ports that India has. Now, how are the port businesses and trading businesses different? Are they different? Are there commonalities? Do one skill set work with the other? Now, these are things that HR people should kind of get into in depth. And the best way of learning them is to be sitting with business people in their meetings, understanding on a one-to-one level. For example, when I had never understood trading when I joined Adani Group. And we were sitting and there was a news that in Argentina, it rained heavily. And one of the oil traders got up and he said, I'm coming in a little while. So I was wondering what the hell happened. He saw something happening in Argentina and it as if there was an earthquake next door. He ran away. So after about an hour, he came back and I asked him what happened. He says, I had been buying a lot of oil from there and the market would have had an adverse effect. So I was going to cover my bets. Now, I didn't understand anything about trading. So I said, this is something which is different. So I had to spend time to understand what it is and realize that they work in silos. And they are their own individual people who do not want to share what they are doing with others because they, at the end of the day, as traders, are responsible. Now, here we were trying to make a team out of a trading organization where traders are individualists by nature of the business. So how do you overcome that? Since I started to understand that business a little, I said, if we can bring out a method by which an MIS can be generated, where all have to be present to present what they have been up to, whether they have had losses, profits, what are the future projections, etc., which is commonly done by many companies, but not so much in trading companies, things started improving. And we found that there are common skills across businesses, which means you can give opportunities for people to shift from one to the other and do better in the process because of their past experiences. For example, logistics is a commonality which is very big between people who are in trading and people who are in ports. And we use that to our great advantage. But unless you get into the nuts and bolts of businesses, I feel, that is my personal opinion, that you as an HR person will not find much acceptance, and you will continue to do the mundane jobs that HR has been doing for many, many years. I hope I have tried to kind of answer your question.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Chinu?
To Aryan. So my next question would be to Anil sir. Sir, it's one of the questions where even it has come from personally being working with you. So at a very young age, sir, just you were in your 30s and you founded ECS and you had to go and do the business development for your company. So how difficult was it for you to fetch to all these clients, and what were the challenges that you had faced being a young professional? Nobody would love to, or to at least give a chance. So please share some of your experiences and insights.
See, first of all, ECS was in my dream when I was in college, when I was doing my MBA and I went for my summer internship, interviewed with the Tatas. I told them that I'll work in industry for the first 10 to 15 years. Then I would create a consulting company that would help India's economic development. And I used to call it economic development based on sound values. So without spiritual impoverishment. In my interview with the Aisha chairman and board, when I was selected, I had mentioned the same thing to the Aisha colleagues as well. So when over those 10 years, I kept getting different roles. And then I made a member of Aisha's board when I was 35. And then Vikram Lal, the chairman, asked me that would you now still want to set up your consulting company because you could potentially move into more senior responsibilities within the group itself. And I said, Vikram, you know me well. For me, it's not the position, but it's my life's mission. I want to create an organization that serves the country. And, it's something quite amazing that when you are inspired by a cause, then you become the first servant of that cause. The world's best leaders happen to become best leaders because they are the world's best followers. So in my case, I was so inspired by this call, and I said, this experience of bringing, organizations to become more effective based on right values. So there were three parts to that. How do you involve people totally? It's what we call total employee involvement. How do you learn to do more with less for the, and then how do you make sure that you use the right means for advancement? So around each of these things, we had created a practice area. And the beautiful thing is in Aisha, we had a laboratory where we did many experiments. We were the first Indian company to bring the Japanese concept of Kanban and lean manufacturing and total quality management in our plants. And because we had done the huge transformation in all our plants with thousands of our employees, the first set of clients that hired us, we used to bring them to Aisha and go and say, let's take you for a study mission. And people from industry used to come, like Dr. Jamshed Irani from Tata Steel brought his entire leadership team and other heads of different people to spend 2 days in our plants to learn from how Aisha was doing this whole process. So the credibility came out of the work. And the first client, when we announced ECS, and meanwhile, of course, I was also part of, CII at a young age. I was made chairman of the National Committee on Employee Relations. I was in my 30s at that time, and here I was with Mr. Tata, Mr. Godrej, and all these wonderful people, Rahul Bajaj. And, I'm surrounded by all these industrialists. But because of Aisha's work, that honor was given to Aisha and somebody who was the board member of Aisha representing that. So because of then again the work done in CII to make a difference, the first few clients saw the work in Aisha and they saw the work that we had done in also CII along with others. And when Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, some of us involved in National HRD Network. I remember Sam Petroda was doing the work on CDOT and technology mission. So we created a group of HR people, including co-authors of this book in which we all feature, like Arvind Agarwal, for example, and a host of others. And we created a think tank to work with the Prime Minister's office and the technology mission with Sam Petroda to say, what could we do to make a difference? I remember taking Sumantro Ghoshal, who had come on a visit, and taking him to meet Sam Petroda. So there was this, I don't know how to describe that. There was this fervor at that time. India was liberalizing, and there were some young people in HR who said, we want to come together and we want to make a difference. When the national education policy was formed, some of us were part of the core group that drafted the policy. So it was very interesting that all this work put together had prepared us. So when ECS was announced, I think companies called us because they had seen the credibility. And I think credit goes to all my colleagues in Aisha and the amazing people, the employees. I just became an instrument in serving. The credit goes to the people who actually did the work. And I ended up getting recognition for it. But actually the work was done by thousands of people together, and the wonderful values of the company that were inculcated by our founders. So, and because the cause was great, I think the business development happened because of the cause, not because there was anything about all of us. So that's a rather honest answer about how ECS was created and what led to its significant growth subsequently.
Being one of the witness here right now, working with Anil sir, it's like I'm seeing in day-to-day life like how strong the roots were of ECS, which is actually leading us a lot of work and appreciation in our field. So thank you, sir, for letting that know to everybody. Swati, you can take it over.
Thank you, Chinu. So my next question is for Anand Nayak, sir. Sir, you have served at ITC for more than 42 years, which is a very long tenure with the company. And you even held various portfolios and has worked across the several businesses as well. And as well as you have worked as a corporate at corporate headquarters, where you actually headed the human resource function. So my question is basically, what were the turning points in your career that were a key to your success at ITC, sir?
Yeah, I'll talk about my career in ITC, not necessarily a successful career, but I'll talk about it. Yeah, for me, ITC was my family, right? It was not just the organization I worked for. So that's the biggest, the most important difference. And secondly, ITC gave me a sense of purpose and meaning, right? Because ITC was not just in business, ITC was in existence to create value for society and for the nation. And that was the inspiration constantly during the 42 years that I worked with that great company, right? And if you ask me what were the things I really enjoyed and which I look back upon with great happiness, one is that as a member of the HR team, I was able to join the others in transforming ITC from a single product company to a multi-product company over 15 or 20 years. And I had the good fortune of being there throughout as a member of the team. So that gave me huge satisfaction and was a huge motivation to me. The second was helping to build a culture of care and concern, and at the same time, not compromising on competitiveness. Now, there's one thing creating a culture of care and concern, but it's also equally important from the business point of view that the business, while caring for people and being compassionate for people, should not compromise on competitiveness. So, how do you balance these two equations is another important lesson that I learned. The third thing that I cherish is that we went through several difficult, challenging times, and the joy was in the entire team working together to come out of these difficult times, to facing these challenges, and to really coming through above them and putting them behind us. And in this process, recognizing that every organization has a large number of unsung heroes who really surface in times of crisis. In normal times, sometimes you don't recognize them, but in times of crisis, you do. And it also gave me an understanding that different people and organizations have different strengths. And it's the challenge of leadership is how do you develop synergy, and how do you facilitate these skills to complement each other and build a robust organization. I think that's what a great learning for me in ITC. And the third thing which gave me great satisfaction was to helping craft the CSR strategy of ITC and to oversee it over 15 years, even before CSR became mandatory. So that was a great source of satisfaction for me. And therefore, if I were to sum it up, I think ITC gave me an opportunity to make a difference to the lives of people, and through several of ITC's initiatives to create thousands of livelihoods. And that's been my greatest source of satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was pleasure listening to you, and how you actually come up with the culture of the care and the concern, and then the compassionate for people. So, sir, it was really glad listening to you, sir.
Just one addition, if I can ask you, when you look back at your 40 years in ITC, are there any red flags which you could help with the youngsters? What is it that they should look out for? The mistake that they should not make?
Well, we will all make mistakes. You can't manage a career without making mistakes. But I think it's important that you own up to your mistakes, right? You take responsibility, and you won't go wrong drastically if you are committed to certain values that the organization has, the values of transparency, of ethics, of integrity, respect for people, and the value of trusteeship. If you anchor your entire culture on these values, you will never go wrong in any drastic manner. You will face difficulties, but you will overcome them. And we will all make mistakes. We have to learn from them. And that's the excitement of a long journey. That when you look at a career of over 40 years, it's bound to, you're bound to make mistakes, you're bound to face challenges. But I think the excitement is to face those challenges and overcome them and leave some kind of a legacy behind once you've left.
Thank you so much. So I think we have the last 5 minutes. Do we have time for one more question?
Ma'am, can I ask?
Yes, yes, sure.
So, sir, my question is to Anand Nayak, sir, again. So, sir, in earlier, sir, you have served ITC, as I said, more than 42 years. So, in earlier years, serving an organization for decades was considered as an achievement. But however, in today's time, we see that young graduates are prone to switch jobs and career in very short span of time. So, what would be your advice to the younger generation, sir?
Yeah, my suggestion would be, I won't give advice, but my suggestion would be that it's important to look after your own career growth, right? Which is your own growth as an individual, and you may change organizations to in lieu of looking after your own career progression. But I think you have to also have a focus on what difference am I making, right, to people around me. And I think whilst no one would expect you to work for a company for 40 years like I did, I would say work long enough to leave some legacy, to make some difference. Because at the end of 40 years, if you look back on a career where you hopped jobs every 2 years and didn't have time really to make a difference to people and to make a contribution to society, then at the end of 40 years, you'd feel quite useless. So what I'd like to say is, one is you must have your own career aspirations, but equally focus on what you want to achieve in terms of making a difference to the lives of other people. And if you can do so, you may have a career of 4 jobs or 5 jobs, but I think in each of these, you can make a difference and establish a legacy. So I would suggest that you look at your career from that perspective.
Thank you. Right. So I think we have the last 3 minutes, and thank you so much for enlightening us with your your experiences. And I think what I've seen in leaders, and when I was reading this book, Leaders in the Making, I think the authors have done a wonderful job. Where I find that what has actually strikes to me is that all of you here have been a very, very strong people person. So whether it is handling your juniors, handling your peers, or even handling your seniors, I think that's an art, because you're either good at being good friends, or you are good at leading your juniors. But handling your people whom you're reporting into is also a very big challenge. How do you manage your relationship with the seniors who are actually holding the reins of your career in their hands? And so that was one last final, maybe a minute if each one of you can just tell me, how do you manage this entire gamut of operations where you look at right from the MD to the, like Anil said, to the worker who came and hugged him, to being an
Well, all I can say is, Ranjita, maybe you're having some tech issues, but all I can say is that you must really enjoy people. And, if you enjoy people, irrespective of their position, and if you enjoy people, irrespective of their background, but simply take the joy in the success of others, I think the biggest high in my life has been to see so many of my colleagues flourishing and doing well. And this is not just colleagues like the people, the MBAs we hired from the good schools, and then to see them becoming CEOs one day, or, Aisha produced HR people. I think there are more than 100 heads of HR, including global heads of HR, who have come from the Aisha system, right? Like the global head of HR of Novartis, he is an ex-Aisha guy, for instance. But the satisfaction of seeing a workman from the factory being identified in a development center, to being sent to XLRI for an MBA course, to come back in HR manager's job and become a senior VP in HR somewhere. To see the joy of that and, to enjoy that is really what this is about, to genuinely feel happiness at the success of others and your colleagues. If you are like that, then it doesn't matter whether you are working with an MD or a union leader or a colleague. You will always enjoy this function, because it's all about and saying, okay, let's celebrate the success. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yes, Saurabh sir, anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, just, to add to what Anil is saying, you feel satisfaction when someone prospers because of the organizations having enabled him to do so. To give an example, Adani started a school in Ahmedabad for the underprivileged. And the underprivileged who had merits were selected. Now, how do we decide whether the school has served a purpose or not? So we sat down and we felt that if after 10 years of running the school, if there is someone who can get admission into an IIT, then we probably have done our job well. With that kind of an objective, we started the school. It is running presently quite well. And in 6 years, it happened that one of the students got into one of the top colleges of India, and we felt happy about it. Now, when one goes to that school, the feeling that, the enjoyment which is spread by children who are there, and you get the benefit of their enjoyment being shared with you, it's, I think, a job satisfaction that cannot be replicated.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mr. Anand, sir.
Just the same. I think the joy is really to help people become better versions of themselves. And if you can do that, you'll always enjoy your work as an HR professional.
Thank you so much. And it was indeed a pleasure. And I look forward to many more interactions with such, leaders like you who are still, working so well and doing so well and giving us the guiding light. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for being part of this leadership series.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
thank you for the audience of students and other colleagues for joining in as well. So thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you
to
so
all
much.
of you.
And thank you,
Bye-bye.
students,
Bye.
for all your contribution. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.